Well, good morning, everyone. Today's March 31st, 2025. We are here for the 11 a.m. work session, and our discussion item is Larimer on the Move Draft Safety Action Plan. I'm Kristen Stevens, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. With me are my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally and Commissioner John Kafalis. We have our Assistant County Manager, Lori Kadrich, with us this morning, and I am going to turn things over to Mark Peterson, our Engineering Director. He'll introduce the topic and turn it over to other folks that we have at the table, and we'll have people introduce themselves as they speak. So welcome, everyone.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioners. Mark Peterson, County Engineer. Appreciate you're giving us an hour of your time to go over what we consider to be a very important activity that's been underway for quite some time now. That's development of a comprehensive safety action plan covering unincorporated Larimer County. Eric Tracy with the Engineering Department, Senior Engineer, but also Project Manager on the whole Larimer on the Move efforts. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and he and our consultants from Felsberg, Holt, and Olvig will be taking the meeting from this point forward. So again, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Commissioners, for having us here today. We're excited to be here to present what we've been working on for quite some time now. We've had a lot of interaction with the public and other stakeholders throughout this process, and we're excited to present this first piece of the Larimer on the Move project to you today. I do want to recognize others with us today: Leslie Ellis, Todd Juergens, our Road and Bridge Director, and Brian Franken, our Larimer County Traffic Engineer, all part of our team for Larimer on the Move. We do have our consultant here today, as Mark mentioned. We have Jenny and Garov from Felsberg, Holt, and Olivig, FHU. We will be turning the presentation over to them for the majority of our discussion today. But wanted to, again, thank you for having us here. So I'll go ahead and turn it to FHU. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Young with FHU. So I will do a quick kind of overview and reminder of the overall Larimer on the Move planning process and the integration of both the transportation plan and the safety action plan. And then I'll turn it over to Gaurav to get into the nuts and bolts of the safety action plan. He'll share with you some highlights of the engagement, the data analysis, and the recommendations of the plan, and then we'll talk through the next steps. So just as a reminder, I am the project manager for the transportation plan component, and Gaurav is the project manager of the safety action plan component. And we've been working together very closely because the two plans are very much integrated. And Eric, if you'll go to the next slide, just a little bit to set the stage on what Larimer on the Move is. We've branded the two plans as Larimer on the Move. And both plans are being done concurrently. They started concurrently, and a lot of the focus of this branding of Larimer on the Move was for the public interface. The safety is obviously a very critical element of the transportation plan, and we didn't want to confuse the public by having these two different plans occurring at the same time. So from the public perspective, it's been, everything has been messaged under the umbrella of Larimer on the Move. So that has been, I think, very, very beneficial because it has enabled us to have conversations with the community about all things related to transportation and mobility in Larimer County. While the transportation plan is a bigger picture, we're looking at all modes of transportation, we're looking at safety, we're looking at mobility, we're looking at access, we're looking at biking, we're looking at walking transit, roadways. The safety action plan is much more targeted and focused. So the way that we're doing this is the safety action plan will ultimately be an appendix to the transportation plan, and will pull in key elements of the safety action plan into the transportation plan itself. While the two plans started in tandem, the schedules are deviating. We're pushing the safety action plan forward because of the possibility of getting implementation or demonstration grant funding through the SS4A program. And actually, the notice of funding opportunity came out this morning, so it's very timely. So we're aiming for you to adopt the plan on April 14th to be in a position to be able to pursue implementation or demonstration grant funding through that SS4A funding opportunity that's due in June 26th. And then the transportation plan, and there's a slide at the end that talks a little bit more about the process for the transportation plan, but we do still have another phase of community engagement for the transportation plan. So that will be coming to you later. So today's discussion is really pretty singularly focused on the safety action plan. And then one other item that I just wanted to point out, the connection. I understand that last week you had a work session on the polling. You heard about the polling that was done related to the ballot initiative last year. And while that is not a part of this effort, it is definitely related. The transportation plan, is updating your last plan that was done in 2017. So part of the transportation plan is really getting our arms around what all of the transportation needs of the county are, and so being able to, effectively tell the story of the funding needs that you have and the gap in the transportation.
But a lot of emphasis is on community engagement and equity as well because of the safety issues that we see in underrepresented communities. So these are the 8 requirements of the SS4A. So the safety action plan has to meet all of these in order to be eligible for the implementation demonstration grants that are coming up. So I can just read through these. The leadership, commitment, and goal setting. One of the ideas behind this is adoption of a visionary goal, so to speak, a goal that looks to break the safety trends because there are still fatalities happening in systems. So it is a lofty goal. So they do require that communities, agencies commit to such a goal. And then the planning structure is, of course, around so that the analysis is not done in isolation, but along with the Transportation Oversight Committee. So a lot of the TOC is here in attendance today, so it's been an interactive process in which they keep us on track, make sure that we are, doing the analysis properly in an acceptable way, in a way that makes sense. The engagement, collaboration, and that's where it really helped to be working with the transportation plan because we were able to work together in tandem and out in the outreach, and then we also did a statistically valid survey, which we sent out to the communities across unincorporated Larimer County to make sure it wasn't just about isolated pop-up events. The safety analysis, of course, that's the crash data analysis. Again, this is a very data-based study, so that's the traditional stuff. Equity considerations. This is extremely important in the prioritization of the project. So again, the US DOT requires, as part of the SS4A program, that we not only do the community engagement, but consider the equity considerations, the equity index, as we develop projects and prioritize projects based on that. That leads to the implementation strategies and eventual prioritization of those projects. The last step is about transparency and making sure that if we do put in the investment, and or the DOT provides this investment, we have to track and make sure that are our strategies working. It's not punitive, it's about making sure that as you move into the future, if you need to refine any implementation strategies or safety improvements, see what's working, what's not working, and because this is a living document, you will update some of these information. You want to make sure that it remains effective. Next slide, please.
Can I ask you just a
course.
really quick question? I know that equity considerations was part of the initial Safe Streets and Roads for All. Is that true with the new NOFO that came out? I mean, did they change any of the criteria? Is that something we still need to show if we're looking for an implementation grant, or because the new administration has not wanted to look at equity as one of the criteria, has anything changed?
So I'll admit that I didn't have a chance this morning before I left to go through it. I tried to do some few quick clicks, but I didn't see anything. The way I think of it right now is that when the county signed the original IGA, equity was a requirement. So we have to carry that through with our safety action plan. So unless we are told to take it out, I think it behooves us to keep it in and keep it as a consideration.
Thank you. And then I guess, with the implementation grants, that may change and we can kind of look at those criteria as we move forward in the process. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Just a quick precursor to is that the focus was unincorporated Larimer County. And as it says up there, basically mainline county roads that are owned and maintained by Larimer County. So CDOT roadways are not part of it. CDOT cannot apply for SS4A grants. And of course, as the implementation grants come in, there is a match required. So the county wants to focus on the roads that are maintained by the county for this project. Next slide, please. Starting with engagement, there's just some information. I mean, I don't intend to read it all, but I think what the intent here is that we went to multiple community locations for conversations. We also had a social pinpoint map online where people could drop their comments, could visit, could make their suggestions. Then the statistically valid survey, which was sending out mailers, text messages, things of that nature. We have a slide on that further down. And of course, since it was statistically valid, it was weighted based on multiple factors that we will mention on that slide. This is the valid survey that I was talking about. What I'd like to see stress upon is the aggregate results were weighted, as it says in the bottom, based on demographics, base age, Hispanic origin, gender, whether you own or rent a home, and place of residence. So the idea was to get a comprehensive picture. I think we actually ended up getting quite a good response eventually with all of those combined. So the survey, of course, there's a whole appendix in the safety action plan because it's a pretty elaborate survey. I think I understood most of it. But the idea being that it's very detailed and takes a lot of things into consideration. Next slide, please. The safety trends and data analysis, this is, of course, the backbone of the study. The idea is with the Vision Zero being the overarching philosophy behind it, is the lofty goal of 0 fatalities and 0 severe injuries at some point in the future if we keep working towards breaking that safety curve. Larimer County actually does not have a dire safety problem if you look at the data when I see it compared to others, but the point is even that is something we want to work on there, that even that is something that we could improve upon if we are able to get the funding and do the things that make sense and we always wanted to do. So the development of the high injury network is one of the requirements of the safety action plan or the safety data analysis. As the name suggests, it's basically identifying, if I take a step back, we would love to put funding into every roadway, but it's not feasible. So you have to identify where you have the most effectiveness of the investment. So for that, you develop the high injury network, which is the roadway segments and intersections where we're seeing the highest number of crashes or the highest crashes of concern, with a focus on killed and severely injured crashes. So you see the KSI reference there at the bottom. That's what it represents. So severity of the crash data is what's called a CABCO scale. It goes from a fatality, from a severe injury to a visible injury to a suspected injury to no injury. So the goal is usually to focus on the top 2 types. Because of the low number of crashes, we actually ended up focusing on all injuries and all fatalities in this action plan to be more comprehensive. As you can see, it's really an interesting statistic to see that we're representing 15% of the mainline county roads, which contribute to 81% of the killed and severely injured crashes. So you have a small segment which is contributing to 80% of these crashes of concern. So the idea is if we focus on these 15%, we will be on our track to severely having an impact on safety.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really appreciate your presentation so far, and I'm just kind of looking at some of these areas since I live in our corporate areas, but looking at some of the areas are around some of our more tourist oriented areas. Horsetooth is probably one of those visited reservoirs in the state, and then we have Estes Park with 4.5 million people, and I see those kind of two roads coming down and seeing the roads coming maybe around where the reservoirs are, and I'm just wondering, does any of that have the tourism or maybe uneducated visitors who don't know how to drive in mountains or there are a lot of roads, does this contribute to some of these numbers, and how do we impact that? So I'm just curious about that. Having been up and down the mountains the last couple of days, and when I'm in lots of rain and sleet, and just watching how others, not picking on them, but for their own safety, driving in some of these conditions, and there was some. I saw some post-fire flooding and in those areas. So I'm just curious about how do we impact those visitors and tourists that we welcome, but we want them to all be safe and our residents be safe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are part of the crash picture. And actually, by the reservoir, we're seeing one of the higher densities of motorcycle crashes as well. So a lot of recreation-related crashes. Our idea is to approach it with a multi-pronged effort. So in one of the following slides, we talk about, so the idea is the safe system approach is multi-pronged approach to safety. And we're focusing on 3 of the 5 main elements, which are under the county's control, which is roadway design, which is safer speeds, and education and safer people. So, we'll have to do what we can in terms of making sure the public is educated in terms of how, multiple things that you could educate them upon, and provide a system that is forgiving. So even if you make a mistake, so that's one of the parts of the safe system approach is everybody makes mistakes. The human body is fragile, kinetic energy. You have to develop features in the roadway that can forgive, absorb without serious injuries. So those are some of those layers. But yes, education is part of it. And unfortunately, if there is recreational traffic, there's a lot that's coming from outside, and we have to. The plan is attempting to cover all of those bases as best we can.
Thank you.
So, next slide, please. This is the second aspect of it, and it's called a high-risk network. So the first map was the high injury network, which is based off of crash data that exists. However, especially in rural areas, low volume, low population densities, you won't see as many crashes because you don't have high AADTs or volumes of traffic. But the point remains that the safety risk still exists. So the idea behind a high-risk network is to develop contextual factors such as the ones that you see up there, kind of road with functional classification, could be presence of median speed limits, those kind of things. Identify those risk factors and align them with the crashes that we want to mitigate. And then you put the crashes aside and focus just on the risk factors, and then lay those out in terms of, through GIS, find out where those risk factors are overlapping and develop that network. And that's what you see here is a lot of these risk factors that we identified and then mapped out as a separate analysis is what's part of the high-risk network. Interestingly enough, unlike some of the other studies that I've done, we had a high overlap of the high-risk and the high-injury network. It's not quite visible here, but if you notice, there's the lighter maroon lines. Those are you have that's the high-injury network, and then the darker ones are the high-risk, and we've seen a lot of overlap in these two. So we identified these contextual factors, developed a high-risk network, and then together with the high-risk and the high-injury network is our safety picture. This is our problem statement. These are our problem areas that we need to focus on. And the next step is, what do we do? Next slide, please. So in order to break it down, this larger complex pictures, the first step is to identify simpler focus areas, which is, at the state level, you might hear emphasis areas. It depends on what kind of plan you're working on. Here, we identified them in where we were seeing the most crashes. So intersections where we're seeing a lot of unsignalized intersections specifically, a lot of broadside crash issues, fixed object crash issues, which is actually just throughout the county. We identified vulnerable road users, especially motorcyclists, that were of concern. So strategies that we come up with have to keep those in motorcyclists in mind. It's interesting. What I don't see here, I'm not showing here, is like you see 34% of severe is under motorcycles, but basically I think total crashes there were probably, I don't remember, maybe 17%, but then in severity it more than doubles. So it's overrepresented and a concern. And of course the human behavior side of things, which is we tend to focus on engineering, but you have to realize that 90% of crashes have human behavior elements to them. So that's why this plan also considers human behavior. A lot of these factors, risk factors that we've identified, have come through the public engagement efforts and the survey. So speeding, distracted driving, reckless, aggressive driving, those have been of concern. The corridors, the picture is very typical of a rural network. We're seeing a lot of run off the road, crash-related stuff. So departure from the roadway, which results in fixed object crashes or overturning, those kind of things have been identified. So this was our first attempt to start focusing on the problem.
Gaurav, I think that Commissioner Gonzalez has a question. Do you? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Garth. Just a quick question on the motorcycle data point. Are we also able to document what percentage or how many people are wearing helmets, not wearing helmets, and how that may or may not contribute to severity of crashes?
So we do have that data to a certain extent. Sometimes it's missing, but we do have that data. But the helmet is a really important one, and that's part of the education of asking people to. I mean, we don't have a law, but that's also where some of those complications in the past have come in terms of freedom and having the freedom to wear or not. And one interesting not anecdote, but a data point that I've read in some of the papers is a lot of these crashes, fatalities, severe injuries on motorcycles occur at very low speeds. Like could be 5 or 10 miles per hour. They literally just fall off the bike and hit their head. And in those situations, such a helmet would be highly effective.
May I do a quick follow-up?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. And you're reminding me, when I was in the legislature and there was discussion about passing state laws that would require 18 and older to wear motorcycle helmets, typically the state capitol would get surrounded by motorcyclists. So that's a very contentious issue. But I guess we do have state law that says under 18 you are required to wear a motorcycle helmet. In terms of dissecting that data further, do we also have information about passengers on motorcycles and whether or not they were wearing helmets and perhaps individuals under 18?
We do have, so we have looked at the larger crash pictures by age for sure. It makes a lot of sense. It gets a little trickier with the data with passengers, but yeah, the data in the end is as good as the first police report, and sometimes there's just not enough information available. But a lot of these, when we've wanted to get deeper into it, there are narratives associated with some of the crashes, not necessarily all of the crashes, and then you can do a deeper dive in the vulnerable user crashes.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So equity considerations. So again, equity is a really important piece of this whole process. So these were the key components that we looked into for the equity framework. And of course, this goes into the transportation plan as well as the safety action plan. Could probably go to the next slide, which shows so this was developed as part of the master plan, and of course we used it for the safety action plan as well. The equity analysis includes the indices you see there, as again, communities of color and the federally identified disadvantaged communities, and so overlapping those is what you're seeing here. There's a little gradation in color in terms of how many of these factors are, obviously a range was developed, each range is given a score, and then you sum up the score by areas, and it gives you an equity index that we eventually use in our analysis. One of the interesting things that you could see here is like a lot of the high injury network borders or is in these equity areas of concern, which sort of further strengthens the need for this, at least acknowledging equity or looking through an equity lens.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
So I've been looking at the slide for a little bit, and last night, when you look at that area in Estes in the very southwest corner of the county, that's mostly Rocky Mountain National Park, and you really, there's some there's some access and areas, but some of those areas it's going to be hard to address because you can't. I'm just trying to understand how a national park with wilderness areas is being highlighted as an equity area. I'm just curious because I was up there 3 times this weekend, and I know there's some areas that have improved, but I'm wondering what's that? Can you share with me what that is that's highlighting? Why is that such a dark yellow?
I think that actually came up before too.
It did.
Do you want to help answer that?
Sure, yeah, and I can't remember the details of it now, but this question came up before because it is such an relatively unpopulated area outside of Estes Park, where it is the national park. And so we dug into it just to verify the data, and there are some residences in that area that result in the census data showing these equity needs, mobility barriers. It's things like, the residents that live there are older or, have disabilities and lower income that trigger it to be designated this way. And I do think that some of the federal designations were also in there. And Eric, I don't know if you remember any more about when we looked into that. But yeah, while it shows up as dark, I think it's important to understand the nuance of it, that we're not talking about a lot of people, at least in terms of the actual residents that live there.
Well, and some of these residents inside the park are historic, like cabins that have been there before, and
Yes.
and so, I don't know if they live there year round or if they own them. They're maybe older or something, but it's just there's more to that story than that's there. That's why I'm just curious because I'm like, okay, why is that? Why is it getting that rating? So I kind of take all of that with more of a, can you explain more on this? But I guess that's something I could look into later on offline. But I just wanted to see what that looked like and some of those thoughts because there's more transportation up there. There's the buses. There's all these other things. So I'm just curious about that. Thanks for entertaining my question. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Excellent.
Just quickly on that, I think it does boil down to all the data that's identifying these polygons that you see on the map are based on the census data. And then the criteria set by the federal level within these 4 different categories. And I think that what's being triggered here is that economic barrier index where we have a few what the census would consider residents within that area that are below that level. So having said that, it's appearing on the map. However, Larimer County is not responsible for any of the roads in the park, so it's not triggering any projects within our list.
Okay, great. So this analysis resulted in project identification. So in parallel with the transportation plan, we developed a short, mid, and long-term projects identified in terms of for the implementation and demonstration grant funding. So we identified anything that could be completed within 0 to 5 years, immediately to the next 5 years as short-term. Midterm was 5 to 10, and long is beyond that. Of course, the type of projects that you see here, like if you have simpler intersection safety improvements, like you see there, or corridor treatments that can be done quickly, like striping, for example, or quick safety build projects. These are pilot projects that can be funded through the demonstration grant, which is basically anything non-permanent. For example, paint and post, that's like a term they like to use a lot. But it's basically saying that if you have extremely wide roads that encourage higher speeds, you can repurpose or reassign that space to create narrower lanes, provide buffered bike lanes, or what have you, but basically to create, because a lot of the speed decisions that people make is based off of peripheral vision. So if you're on a freeway going 40 miles an hour or a local street 40 miles an hour, you feel very differently. Basically, it's the roadside cues that you are subconsciously absorbing. So that's what that looks to do, is like change your roadside design or something similar to influence speeds, just to make it safer. So those are examples of short and midterm. Next slide, please. The long term would be more infrastructure, where you are, rebuilding intersections or rebuilding or building roundabouts and things of those kind of things, or system-wide policy updates, for example. So those become longer term safety improvements, which require more time, more effort, more involvement in planning efforts. So that's how these were identified. Can't quite see, but those are the project numbers which is eventually tabulated in the safety action plan. This is of course straight out of there. Next slide, please. So this is the prioritization process, and this is where Jenny and I worked on this. And of course, this is highly influenced by what we heard from the public. So these are the evaluation criteria that we use to weight the final numbers, how you come up with a score for each project and to prioritize them within the short, mid, and long-term timeframes. So, the safety impacts, travel choice, equity, and community input in terms of basically covering all the bases that are required by the SS4A program, but also what we're hearing from the public for the planning process itself. So the integration with Larimer on the move is an important one, because we want, again, like Jenny said at the onset, we want this to be part of, a coherent plan that takes both into consideration. Next slide, please. Okay, so I touched upon this previously. So the safer people, safer roads, safer speeds. So these are the 3 bins where we identified. So we had focus areas, and each focus area can be attacked or mitigated, attack's probably a little aggressive, through multiple bins. And these are the 3 that we wanted to do. So safer people is where the education, enforcement, outreach comes into play. So motorcycles, tourists, information, that would be part of this element. Safer roads, this is the traditional engineering and design improvements for safer infrastructure. And safer speeds. So speeds are a cause and a concern in most crashes. People have a lot of concern about it. We see it as a causal factor in many of the crashes, so safer speeds. And it also is, of course, the most complicated of the 3 to mitigate. But it is an effort that's required if we are to, again, improve the safety by a large margin. So we developed a toolbox where we identified safety improvements. A lot of those come from FHWA in terms of what have been identified and proven to be safety countermeasures. And then those could be engineering and safety, speed management, and then of course the education piece, enforcement piece. I think there's as you go through the project list, each project can also be identified as to if this is an intersection that has a large broadside or safety crash issues, then you have certain countermeasures that you can apply to mitigate those particular crash types. And in our safety analysis, we did the whole larger picture descriptive analysis all the way down to a statistical analysis of the crash data as well, so we could apply it from multiple areas. The important part is what the county is already doing. Like I said, the safety picture is actually not dire in the county. We're seeing pretty, decent safety improvements already happening. And these are the elements that the county is already doing, and the report and the safety action plan intends to build upon a lot of these. So you might see some improvements where we say continue or build upon, or the things of that nature. The first piece that you see, the annual safety report, that's again, the county is already monitoring the safety improvements over time and seeing what's working, what's not working, which is extremely effective. And that's something we would build upon as part of the safety action plan in terms of the transparency and monitoring of those projects, or safety overall for the county as well. The key actions for implementation, you'll see the public education campaigns on speeding, and enforcement is always complicated, but that's also an option in high-risk areas, school zones, for example, perhaps. And then, of course, the last piece in that bullet is the performance tracking via a safety dashboard. So if we go to the next slide. So this is an example of the dashboard that we developed in Power BI on the right-hand side. So that is actual crash data. It's basically like a visual pivot table, honestly. And then what a user can go, it's very user intuitive. You can click to see how crashes are changing over time. You can look to see what types of crashes are happening, what time of day, the age, multiple factors that you can do. You can look at them by year, all the years. It depends what selections you make. And of course, on the left-hand side, has the severity. So you could also look at each of these crashes based on what, maybe you only want to see fatalities, maybe you only want to see certain injuries, or maybe you want to see all. So it provides all of that. And of course, that slide at the bottom right now that's just being able to change the time frame that you're looking at. So this will be up to the county, whether it's public facing, internal facing, but it's a great tool to monitor. And as yearly crashes are available, you can update the database behind the dashboard relatively simply to update the dashboard as more and more crash data becomes available. And the hope is that this will work in concert with the annual safety summary report that the county develops every year. I think the next slide might be you, Jen.
Yes, so we are hoping to come back to you on April 14th for adoption of the Safety Action Plan. And then the county will be able to use this document to pursue, future funding, including the SS4A opportunity that is currently out. And one thing that I wanted to note in response to your earlier question about whether the NOFO has an equity focus, while we did, we moved forward just as, recognizing that equity is important to the county, separate from any funding source. We do have in the project prioritization, we have, weighted the different criteria. And there is flexibility, and we'll turn over the prioritization spreadsheet to the county. So there is flexibility to be able to look at, for example, if it's not a focus for pursuing SS4A funds, we can de-emphasize the equity component of the prioritization and look at, which projects would score the highest based on the other things like the safety, multimodalism, public input, and so forth. So there's a lot of flexibility in being able to adjust, based on what criteria is important. And they're also, and this is where the safety action plan gets folded into the transportation plan. We have other criteria in the transportation plan that we're looking at, things like regionalism and resilience, that will add on to the scoring that's very specific to the SS4A components. So just know that there's flexibility in there that you'll have. And then in terms of next steps for the transportation plan, we have a draft plan nearly ready for staff review. They'll be getting that in the next week or so. And as I mentioned, we're weaving key components of the safety action plan into the overall transportation plan. We are planning to have a public and stakeholder review period in May for the draft transportation plan. And then hoping to go through the adoption process in June.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all. This is really a great presentation, all the data and graphs, and I'm looking through the plan, and I appreciate the collaboration and partnership with everyone. It's and it reads well. It really it tells the story and then gives the steps in the plan. So I really like how it flows. I'm wondering about the stakeholder review. Those are the stakeholders, the same maybe group of stakeholders that you engaged in the beginning, that with all of the feedback and input, Or is it a new stakeholder group, and, or what does that look like? I'm curious about that.
So the stakeholder review will be focused on the transportation plan and not the safety action plan. We really tried to keep for the safety action plan, in order to kind of expedite the adoption process, stick to the requirements of the federal requirements. And that does not require a public and stakeholder review of the draft plan. So that stakeholder engagement will be focused on the transportation plan. Of course, the safety action plan is an element of that. And yes, that will be the same stakeholders. We have an internal stakeholder group that is an interdepartmental group within the county. And then we also have an external stakeholder group that is the municipalities within Larimer County, the CDOT, the adjacent counties, as well as the general public.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I look forward to the hearing and the adoption and just the ongoing implementation and discussions. And again, well done, and well done to everyone. Appreciate all the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kofalos, any questions or comments? Please go ahead.
Thank you. I think one of my questions was answered about the May review of the public review of the draft master plan, transportation master plan. Hoping we can get more details. How we'll be able to support that effort, whether it's conversations. I'll be back up in Red Feather, perhaps May 8th. Couple of other questions really quickly, hopefully. One is, with all of the various prioritization of projects, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, are there any cost estimates to help us in terms of prioritizing in budgets, and if and how we might go back to the voters to make the case for why investment in transportation is important? So that's one question, Madam Chair.
So for the cost estimates, we didn't develop detailed cost estimates because, so if you're doing, say, an infrastructure project or rehauling, it requires a lot of information in order to develop a proper cost estimate. But we did do overall estimates in terms of high, low, medium costs and those sort of countermeasures. So they're kind of at a very planning level at this point. But if we are able to get more detail on the locations, then we can develop cost estimates and even, benefit cost analysis. But at this level, it wouldn't be as informative.
I appreciate that, if I may follow up. Appreciate that, Garth. I think more in terms of high level, at some point it would be helpful for us to know, the different focus areas or the different, timeframes in terms of potential projects. Like, to accomplish this many short-term projects, we're going to need $5 million, that kind of thing. Eric, sir.
If I could maybe add on to that's specific to our safety action plan. When we're looking at the transportation master plan, we are coming up with more detailed cost estimates, and Jenny's team is working on that right now. We plan to have those numbers, at least draft form, here in a couple weeks, actually, and that will be able to help inform us as we move forward with our initiatives for sales tax and whatnot.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Eric. One more, please, and then I think I'm done. Other than to say thank you. Thank you. And that is regarding the implementation strategies and the categories: safer people, safer roads, safer speeds. And I think you may have alluded to this. The safer speeds one is always interesting, and enforcement aspects of that. But I'm curious, my question is this: what I'm remembering is we have a particular methodology formula for determining whether or not we should adjust speed limits. Perhaps you could remind us of that, Eric. And then how might the safety action plan information inform that process? Would we make some adjustments when we consider decisions around, adjusting speed limits, perhaps, if that makes sense, sir?
Yeah. So I feel Larimer County, we've done a great job at doing speed studies. We have Brian Fraken, our traffic engineer here. He's devoted quite a bit of time to looking at areas of concern within the county and spending a lot of time not just setting, standard speeds, but actually looking at analysis and determining which speeds are appropriate. There is a process behind that. There are some areas in the study that have identified speed as a concern. We'll continue to look at those, and I think a big part of it is not necessarily posted speed, but again, the speed that the drivers choose to be going when the accident occurs, which then falls towards the enforcement side of things as well. So.
And just a closing comment, I realized I said I was done. Your comments, Eric, reminded me that on the enforcement side, this information, how much are we partnering, collaborating with our sheriff's office? Because oftentimes we hear we don't have enough deputies patrolling up in the northern parts of the county, for example.
Yeah. So, we have reached out to our law enforcement. They are part of our stakeholder group, both internal and external. And we've been working a little closer with them as well. We've been getting a lot of speed data off of a software program that we've subscribed to and had those discussions. Also, FHWA, they're putting together more of a regional workshop between engineering and law enforcement that we've been invited to. We'll be attending that here in a few weeks.
So one of the questions, I remember for a while we had the map up and people could identify where they felt places that were unsafe. And that kind of goes to near misses or, really probably vulnerable road users, I think would be, very, I don't feel safe riding my bike on this road because of, situations, even if there haven't been accidents. So is that captured anywhere in here, is some of that? Because I think there were quite a few people actually that went onto that map and identified areas that they felt unsafe. Is that part of this?
Yes. In the weighting factors, one of those was community input is one of the factors that we use to prioritize projects. And we also, the idea was like we have a high injury, high risk network developed, but where we also seeing comments or community concerns that we've gotten through social pinpoint and in-person events and the mail-in. And you're right, we actually saw a lot of concerns regarding biking and things of that nature. So yeah, to answer your question, we do have that as part of our prioritization process.
And so did that come from both that map and you said then the events that you had and any other kind of, did people weigh in on any other kind of ways? I don't know how, or were those the most
The
common?
main ones that we did were the in-person pop-up events, the mail-in statistically valid survey, and of course the online map. So those were three, and we got pretty substantial.
And with the survey, they were, were they asked to, so were there open-ended questions where they were allowed to kind of put in intersections or corridors that were problematic to them?
I think the social pinpoint was certainly an important one, but the statistically valid survey was actually quite comprehensive in terms of all of these questions.
And if I may, one item to add, when we did the polling back before the November election, there was an opportunity in that poll to provide location-specific concerns. So we added that because, we had asked the community, where do you see these issues? So we added those all into the social pinpoint platform. So, to make use of all of the information that we were getting. So together, those provided a pretty well-rounded look at where the issues were from the community's perspective.
Right, no, that's helpful, just because there wasn't an accident in a certain place doesn't mean it's not something we need to work on or that people are concerned about. So that's great. Thank you for explaining that. No, I really appreciate this. I mean, I think this is great information to have, to have gone through this exercise, because we always had a safety, we always were collecting this data and doing this kind of work, but it's really, it's more comprehensive and obviously, helps put us in line for implementation grants, which would be really valuable. But it's also great information for us to have as we contemplate, another ask for a transportation sales tax, right? So this is, I just appreciate all the work that's been done. I think this is really great. I'll just ask one more question, and then I'll see if Lori has anything she wants to add. But what about HSIP kind of dollars? How readily available are those for any of these or some of these projects? So that's Highway Safety Implementation Program.
So historically, we've been very successful with the HSIP program for highway safety. We've been able to get funding for guardrails, but it's been, every time the application comes out, we're trying to brainstorm projects to be able to apply for. And now that we have a comprehensive safety action plan, we essentially have the list of projects in front of us, and we'll make that process much easier.
Great, thank you. And then, we'll see, there's also a bill contemplated at the state level that's coming through around vulnerable road users, and it's creating an enterprise through some fees that would be tacked onto insurance. That would be another pot of dollars that would be, available for similar type work. Knowing that the state is really, has, because of budget concerns, has cut a lot of transportation dollars. I think, being creative about where we find these dollars to be able to accomplish these projects is, I know you all know that, so, but, every little bit helps, and certainly the first step is identifying what those projects are, so, thank you. Anything to add, Lori, before we close out?
The only thing I would add is the gratitude to Mark Peterson and his team for doing proactive work long before we got this information. And now we'll have the data to support the work that he and his team have been doing, and better educate and inform the community of where we're at and what our needs are.
Perfect, well said. So, thanks very much for all the work that you've all done, and we appreciate working with you both. It's 11:57, and we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.